Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Olivia Letts, who passed away on February 1st at the age of 93. Ms. Letts was a true trailblazer. After being hired as the first Black school teacher in Lansing, she was a constant force for good in the community. It is my privilege to honor her with these remarks on the floor of the People's House. Born on the south side of Chicago, Ms. Letts didn't let anything get in the way of her own education. According to her grandsons, the only time she was ever late to school was because of a trolley accident. At the rooming house that she and her family shared with other families, she would wake up as early as 4 a.m. to study in the bathroom because it was the only time she could find peace and quiet. She maintained her devotion to learning during her time at the Chicago Teachers College and her 3 advanced degree programs at Michigan State University. Nothing could keep Ms. Letts from the classroom, not even the racial discrimination of the day. To be sure, breaking the color barrier in Lansing schools wasn't easy. The first time she applied to be a teacher, she was rejected with a letter that said the district, quote, had never made a practice of hiring anyone of her race, but would keep her under consideration. Undeterred, Ms. Letts lobbied local leaders until she was asked to reapply. 10 years later, she was promoted to principal. Ms. Letts' story wouldn't be complete without mention of her husband and lifelong love, Richard, who passed away in 1997. For nearly half a century, their union was an unstoppable force for good in Lansing. She as the consummate advocate and role model for students, and he as the city's equal opportunity officer and human relations director for 44 years. They are the namesake of the Letts Community Center, where this photo was taken. Ms. Letts is an eternal optimist. She liked books with happy endings, whether they were Nicholas Sparks novels or President Obama's memoirs. She lived a full life, and her story had a happy ending too. Just a few days before her passing, she parked herself in front of the television, thrilled to watch her fellow Alpha Kappa Alpha sister, Kamala Harris, be inaugurated as vice president. She is survived by her daughter, Eileen, her 2 grandsons, Robert and Matthew, as well as the countless individuals she touched with her grace and humility. Since her passing, the tributes to her life have been effusive. She was just delightful. She helped pave the way. She just did what was right. And my personal favorite, her legacy lives on in the work that folks are doing here in our community. What a fitting way to remember such a towering figure in the Lansing community. May she indeed live on in the work and in the words spoken into the permanent record of the People's House. Mr. Speaker, today I rise to honor another legend in the Lansing community, Mr. James Bibbs. Mr. Bibbs has had many words written about him over the years, and almost all of them mention his distinction as the longest tenured track and field coach in Michigan State University history. From 1968 to 1995, his students won 52 Big Ten titles, 26 All-American honors, 3 NCAA titles, and broke 2 world records. But those who know Coach Bibbs will tell you that it's never been about the number of titles in his own career. What's distinguished him over the years was the size of his heart and the kindness he's shown over the course of his life. From high school to AAU club teams, collegiate squads, to national and international teams, Coach Bibbs lived by the words he spoke in 2010 when he was inducted into the MSU Athletic Hall of Fame. Quote, "I just love track and I love to work with the youngsters." And yet, it almost didn't happen. After graduating as a star baseball recruit from Ecorse High School, he turned down a minor league contract offered by the Yankees to attend Eastern Michigan University. At the time, EMU didn't have a freshman baseball team, so he decided to join the track team instead. And as with the races he would win as a champion sprinter, he never looked back. Mr. Bibbs later became a teacher in Detroit before assuming the title of coach for the first time in 1959. He led his hometown high school in Ecorse to multiple championships before arriving in East Lansing as an assistant in 1968, the first African-American coach ever hired at Michigan State. In 1977, Coach Bibbs became head coach, and over the next 27 years, he inspired hundreds of student athletes to be their best selves by connecting their personal achievements on the track with their personal achievement in life. Many of his former runners have credited him with planting the seeds of confidence that allowed them to compete all over the world. It's no surprise that several of them have paid it forward by becoming track coaches themselves. Today, his path has taken him full circle as a volunteer with the team at East Lansing High School, where his son is the principal. Even after all the Hall of Fame inductions and all the honors bestowed on him, Mr. Bibbs is still the same gentle and humble man he's always been, a man who loves track and the lessons it can teach others. His wife, Martha, who passed away in October of last year, was his partner of 50 years, a trailblazer in her own right. She was the first woman and first Black woman to serve as personnel director for the state of Michigan. These two were a power couple in Lansing, recognized for their high-profile jobs and their contributions to the community. Mr. Speaker, it is my honor to deliver these remarks so that Coach Bibbs' achievement may forever exist in the congressional record as a proud Spartan, as a legend in the track and field community, and as a pioneer for equality. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize an organization that has been on the front lines of advocating for racial equality over the past 40 years, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commission of Mid-Michigan. Founded in 1979 with the goal of establishing a federal holiday for the icon of the civil rights movement, the MLK Commission realized its mission just 4 years after its founding. Ever since, the group has been working to preserve the legacy and teachings of Dr. King, in part by supporting community agencies and empowering youth to achieve their goals. The Commission's success can be found in its record. 40 high schoolers sponsored each year to go on a college tour of historically Black colleges and universities, more than 100,000 in scholarships awarded, and more than 70,000 in grants given to local organizations. In the past, the Commission has sent delegations to notable milestone events, from the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture to the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. Under the capable leadership of my friend, Ms. Elaine Hardy, its chairperson, the MLK Commission has flourished as a proud beacon of justice in our state. But to really understand the impact, you need only look at the annual day of celebration, the largest and longest running in the entire country. I've been many times. Every third Monday of January, more than 1,500 attendees come together in Greater Lansing to recognize local students, hear from keynote speakers, and recommit to the unfinished work of Dr. King. Each celebration is focused on one of Dr. King's quotes. For this year's event, held remotely for the first time due to the pandemic, the Commission selected, quote, "Out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope," and invited Bernice King to address the group. At a time when we face unprecedented challenges, the MLK Commission of Mid-Michigan is that stone of hope for so many in our beloved community. For 42 years, the Commission has shown what's possible when folks from all walks of life come together under the banner of equality and justice. May it continue to shine as an example of community leadership for the next 42 years, and may its legacy live on forever in the official record of the U.S. Congress. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize a father and son duo who, between them, have served Lansing for over 60 years, James Riley Sr. and James Riley Jr. Their story begins when the elder Riley moved to Michigan after graduating high school at 17. He took a job at the Ford plant in River Rouge, but left 2 years later to join the military when World War II broke out. While stationed in Charleston, he met his future wife of 70 years, Dorisa, at a dance. They moved back to Detroit soon after, and Mr. Riley used his GI benefits to attend Wayne State University while working at the post office. On the advice of a friend, he majored in mortuary science, obtaining his license before moving to Lansing and starting Riley Funeral Home in 1957 as the oldest Black-owned funeral home, and perhaps even the oldest Black-owned business in Lansing. The Riley name is synonymous with being active in our community, being kind and courteous, and serving families with professionalism and grace. But it wasn't an easy path. When Mr. Riley first set out to get his business off the ground, he found that no bank would extend him a loan. It was a time when financial institutions could deny a man a line of credit based on the color of his skin. Indeed, Mr. Riley would later recall that loan officers seemed almost amused by the novelty of a Black man asking for a loan. So he turned to the community, cobbling together his savings with some contributions from his sisters and friends who sold or lent him equipment. At first, business was slow. They had just 7 services in their first year. This was the late 50s, a time when African Americans would routinely be turned away from other funeral homes. If and when they were able to secure a service, they were typically assigned a date and relegated to the afternoon after the white services were finished in the morning. And so it went for the Rileys in their first decade of operation, working hard to earn the trust of the community with sincerity and good faith. It took time and concerted effort, but by the time James Jr. took over the business from his parents in 1993, Riley Funeral Home was handling 150 services per year. In a business that operates on trust, the younger Riley has taken his family's business even further, making sure that every family that comes to him is treated with care and respect. After almost 30 years at the helm, James Jr. has devoted the same attention to detail and standard of excellence his father was known for. James Sr. passed away in 2016, 1 year after Dorisa. And while they may be gone, it's clear that their legacy lives on with their son. Last October, I had the opportunity to visit Riley Funeral Home and talk to James personally about his family's story. He shared how Black-owned businesses were routinely discriminated against and regularly denied capital and credit. It is thanks to legislation passed by this body that that discrimination is no longer the case. The Rileys have overcome tremendous obstacles to get where they are. It is my honor to recognize both father and son today so that their contributions to the Lansing community may live on in the permanent record of the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, I rise to celebrate a living legend in Lansing, Mr. Gregory Eaton, proprietor of Gregory's Soul Food Bar and Grill. Mr. Eaton embodies the motto of, quote, no job too small, no job too large. It may be his name on the door, but he's often found on the floor, bussing tables, offering refills, and making sure that guests are taken care of. Growing up, Mr. Eaton developed a legendary work ethic that continues to inspire to this day. His first jobs were shining shoes for his dad, who worked at the Lansing Country Club and later ran a shoe repair store. When Mr. Eaton was 20 years old, he founded his first company, Greg's Janitorial Service, with the slogan, "We search for dirt." He won cleaning contracts the old-fashioned way, by word of mouth, working hard, and helping others. He hired local student athletes as a way to help them. Even future superstars like Magic Johnson punched a time card under Mr. Eaton for a whopping $1.65 an hour. Mr. Eaton has lived a life out of a movie. He's one of only a handful of individuals to have attended all 53 Super Bowls in person. He's been to title fights, the Masters, and was even in the stands at the 1968 Olympics when Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists at the podium. But no matter how far and wide he travels, Mr. Eaton's heart remains in Lansing. It remains with his 3 kids, 8 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. And it remains with all the individuals he has helped along the way, with his never-ending generosity. Even in the midst of the pandemic that has claimed so many local restaurants, Gregory's Soul Food has been able to keep its doors open thanks to a loyal and dependable clientele. Gregory's is an institution, like the man it is named after. And so today, I'm proud to recognize him on the floor of the People's House so that future generations may learn about his selfless service to the Lansing community. Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize an organization that brings together fierce rivals in the name of shared community, an organization that bridges the sometimes impossible differences between us, an organization helping to bring arch rivals together for the betterment of the community, and most specifically, an organization that literally bridges the 64 miles between Michigan State University in East Lansing and the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Most days, any Spartan or Wolverine will tell you that those miles are still too close for comfort. But on the Friday before the big game between both schools, a new tradition has emerged in the name of charity, community spirit, and expanding access to all. It's called Alex's Great State Race. Named after Alex Powell, a young man accepted to Michigan State as he underwent treatment for a rare and aggressive cancer. Alex had always dreamed of attending MSU. But the surgeries, chemo, and radiation treatment left him unable to carry out his studies with the normal vigor of a freshman student. Thankfully, Alex turned to MSU's Resource Center for Persons with Disabilities, or RCPD. Devoted to inclusivity on campus for students, employees, and visitors alike, the RCPD provided Alex with a dorm room near his classes, offered support to him and his family, and accommodated his needs as they became more complex. They made arrangements to provide Alex the same MSU experience as any other student, even when he was being treated at a cancer center at the University of Michigan, 64 miles away. Despite his valiant fight, Alex lost his battle with cancer in 2011. Those around him remember his vibrant spirit and easy sense of humor, even in the midst of a debilitating illness. More than anything, Alex wanted to leave a legacy that would inspire others, which is how his mother, Juliana, got in touch with the folks at the Resource Center who played such an important role in his life. Together, they created the Great State Race in Alex's name, a charity organization dedicated to raising money for the RCPD, as well as its counterpart at University of Michigan, the Office of Services for Students with Disabilities. Now celebrating its 7th year, Alex's Great State Race is an example of what can unite us. Each year, no matter how intense the rivalry between the two schools, ROTC cadets from both Michigan and Michigan State come together to run the game ball, the 64 miles separating the two campuses. Supported by police that line the route, gracious donations that make it possible, and a community united by the spirit of charity, Alex's Great State Race proves that despite our split allegiances, we absolutely have a common humanity. Today, I'm proud to honor the Powell family, the ROTC cadets, and all the folks involved at both schools who raise money for such a worthy cause. As the Jewish prayer of remembrance says, "So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them." Mr. Speaker, we all remember Alex as long as these words will exist in the congressional record, which is to say, we remember Alex forever. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honor Jessica Wachowski, a young woman making a difference in her hometown of Heartland, Michigan. For her efforts, she has earned the distinction of being one of the first female Eagle Scouts in the country. Drawn by the Scouts' emphasis on environmental stewardship, service to community, and development of leadership skills, Jessica joined the Scouts 2 years ago as a sophomore in high school, shortly after they opened membership to girls. She set her sights on a lofty goal, being a part of the inaugural class of female Eagle Scouts. After building and installing bluebird houses in Settlers Park for her Life Scout rank, she started brainstorming Eagle Scout projects that would similarly align with her love of the outdoors. But soon after, the pandemic hit and stay-at-home orders forced a change. Like a good scout, though, Jessica adapted. She soon realized that the greatest need in the community was for face masks for seniors in retirement homes. Through Zoom meetings and video tutorials, she gathered 16 of her classmates and set out to teach them how to create face masks. The fact that she had never sewn before did not hold her back, nor did the fact that she'd have to sew with gloves on in order to follow the best practices for sanitation and avoiding potential spread. From start to finish, the project took 2 months, and by the time it was completed, Jessica and her determined group of volunteers had surpassed their initial goal of creating 600 masks, which Jessica distributed to the 3 local organizations taking care of seniors vulnerable to the pandemic. Last fall, just by chance, on a tour of cider mills in my district, I actually ran into Jessica at Spicer's. Even now, I can still remember her infectious personality and her 1,000-watt smile, even behind her face mask. She's an impressive young woman, and I'm proud to represent her here in Congress. Although we haven't been able to hold her official court of honor due to the pandemic, I know that it will come, and Jessica will be able to celebrate her achievement surrounded by her friends and family. In the meantime, it is my personal honor to speak these remarks into the congressional record so that folks back home can read about her hard work and dedicated service to community. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I rise to pay tribute to Marcus Goeller, a cornerstone of the Brighton community who sadly passed away late last month. Marcus owned and operated the Brighton Coffee House Theater alongside his wife, Amy, and their 2 kids, Spencer and Macy. The Spot is a mainstay of downtown Brighton, a place to pop in for a quick coffee or pastry, or to take in a show in its 70-seat black box theater. But before it was a reality, it was just a dream between a couple and their kids. Marcus had had a long career in the coffee business, running a chain of coffee shops in college towns all across the Midwest. Amy had acted professionally and directed productions at Brighton High School. One day, while sitting in the children's reading room at a small bookstore on Main Street, they had the idea of opening their own coffee house. What started that day as a dream became a reality in 2018, when Brighton Coffee House and Theater opened its doors and quickly became a cornerstone of downtown. It's the perfect place to gather. I still remember hosting a town hall conversation there in 2019 and the incredible sense of community that you felt as soon as you walk in the door. It's the reason that student organizations and performers constantly use the space, because you immediately feel at home. And as anyone will tell you, that's because of Marcus. He was the soul of Brighton Coffee House, a quiet, kind presence. He treated visitors like neighbors and neighbors like family, always making sure that they were well served and had everything they needed. It was his idea to start the Brighton Yacht Club, a fleet of dozens of little motorized, remote-controlled sailboats that people could rent and sail on the mill pond just outside. He loved his business, and the people loved his business back. He'd be the first to tell you that it wasn't easy, that the road from a conversation to construction was filled with twists and turns and setbacks. But Marcus never met an obstacle he couldn't overcome. His passing is our loss. To Amy, Spencer, and Macy, to all of those who knew Marcus and loved him, may they hold on to the dark roasts, the baked goods, the theater productions that brought them close together. I speak these words today so that his legacy is forever remembered in the permanent record of the People's House, letting all who read know Marcus made a difference. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.